Welcome back. You're watching Bottomline, East Africa on KTN News. On the West African, a U.S. Al-Shabaab suspect, Malik Alim Jones, has pleaded not guilty to charges of supporting the Somalia-based Islamic militant group, the Al-Shabaab. Maryland resident is claimed to have traveled to Kenya in 2011 before undergoing training in Somalia. And as Ashley Mazuri reports, if convicted, Jones could face a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years.
Being in custody of the Somali authorities, Malik Alim Jones, who was accused of traveling to Somalia to join the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab, pleaded not guilty on 13th January. The 31-year-old entered his plea in a federal court in Manhattan 2 days after prosecutors announced his indictment of 5 counts, including that he conspired to provide material support to Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is a group of rebels seeking to overthrow Somalia's Western-backed government and impose a strict version of Sharia, or Islamic law, has links to Al-Qaeda and has carried out attacks in Kenya and Ethiopia. According to authorities, the Maryland resident arrived in Kenya in 2011. Once there, he is claimed to have traveled by taxi to Somalia, where he was taken to an Al-Shabaab camp where he was trained for 3 months, reading and interpreting the Quran and learning how to handle weapons, including an AK-47 assault rifle and rocket-propelled grenades. Following his training, Jones became a member of specialized fighting force within the militant group known as Jaish Ayman that carried out attacks and raids across the border in Kenya. According to court papers, Jones is claimed to have participated in a battle against Kenyan soldiers in the Somali town of Afmado, where he was injured by a missile, resulting to him being hospitalized. The Maryland resident also appeared in several Al-Shabaab videos, including one with fighters who participated in a June 14, 2015 attack on a Kenyan Defense Force base in Lamu County, Kenya, in which 2 Kenyan soldiers were killed. If convicted at trial, Jones faces a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years in prison and a maximum term of life. Ashley Mazuri, KTN News.
Let's now bring in John Allan Namu, journalist and CEO of Africa Uncensored. John Allan, if you've been following this story of Malik Jones, what is his story and his connection to the Al-Shabaab attacks in Kenya?
Well, from what we're seeing from FBI evidence that's been produced in court in New York, he's alleged to have traveled to Somalia in 2011 around the same time that the Hijra had been announced by Al-Shabaab combatants of Kenyan origin. Going to Somalia at that time, and of course, as was said in a voiceover right before this interview, receiving training. But with respect to the Al-Shabaab's more recent activity, he was seen in a video with Osman Lukman Isa Osman, who's called Shirwa. Shirwa was among the people speaking on a video in which the Al-Shabaab alleged that they had perpetrated a number of attacks against Kenya, and that they would be perpetrating more, claiming that Kenyans were cowering in fear. According to this document that has been adduced in court, Malik Jones is right behind Isa, who is speaking on that video, nodding in agreement, meaning that being taken to mean that he not only supported that operation, but also supports the Al-Shabaab. Also been seen in a number of videos where he's alleged to have been carrying an AK-47, rather than allege he actually was carrying an AK-47. So there's a very, very strong link between himself and the Al-Shabaab then.
Right, Malik Jones, if convicted, he'll face a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years. First of all, what impact will that have on the war on terror here in Kenya, and how strong is this case?
Well, based on what's been presented, it seems fairly strong. The links between Malik Jones and the Al-Shabaab are not tenuous at all. They seem to be very strong and based not just on circumstantial evidence, but on actual proof of his travel from the records, him leaving the JFK airport in June or July 2011, where he transited to, how he got into Somalia. All of that has been found out by FBI agents, I'm sure, in conjunction with more local agents. But I think the story of Malik Jones and specifically his linkage to the Jaish-e-Iman would be more useful to the people fighting against the Al-Shabaab here in Kenya and in East Africa. The Jaish-e-Iman, of course, is the commando unit that's been accused of having perpetrated the attacks in Peketoni in July 2014, as well as that attack, that botched attack on the Bodai camp in Lamu County. And knowing their operations, knowing the recruits within the Jaish-e-Iman, at least the unit that Malik Jones was seen to have been part of, would take security agencies one step or two steps further in an understanding where these people came from, the complexion of that unit, seemingly very, very well mixed in with foreigners. If you remember, the person who was recording the video at the Bodai attack was a Briton, and there's a German whose name has not yet been released that has yet to be found. There could have been even more foreign fighters. And of course, this being a global trend, it would be interesting to see whether those foreign fighters have links back to their home countries and back to other combatants that might be planning attacks around the world. Also very interesting to see whether the Al-Shabaab fighters of Kenyan origin have other linkages that to Malik Jones, or that Malik Jones can explain, that would be able to uncover certain networks within the country and within the region. That's something that the NIS, the Directorate of Military Intelligence, as well as other units that are pursuing terrorists in East Africa, specifically at that part of the border, would be interested in, Ben.
The issue of foreigners, and especially Americans, being radicalized and then them coming to Africa, to Somalia, being trained and eventually joining the Al-Shabaab, how rampant is that?
Well, it's rampant not just in Kenya but around the world. Remember, terrorism is no longer the preserve of the Al-Shabaab's main body, with al-Zawahiri releasing an edict and specific followers from a specific part of the world, Afghanistan, Pakistan, following on his command. Globalized terrorism picks on grievances that are very personal to people in different parts of the world. And the research that's coming out right now about globalized terrorism and radicalization is that it has less and less to do with religion. And by religion, I mean the established religions that have been linked to terrorism, be they Christian, Buddhist, or Islam, and more to do with youth grievance and exclusion and marginalization in different parts of the world. And this being generally what a youth in revolt around the world are seen to have been resorting to, more violent efforts to make their voices heard, or to claim some sense of belonging to organizations that hear their voices and feel their grievance, and therefore being used. Of course, there is a conspiracy around, for instance, the formation of ISIS being more of a political tool rather than one that was organic in terms of its formation. But by and large, the radicalization that we see with Malik Jones and we've seen with other foreign fighters going to different parts of the world, including Kenyan fighters who made that hijrah from 2011 up until now, as far as we know, is more about grievance and marginalization than a pure understanding of the religion and religious tenets to which they ascribe. If you look at the fighters that hit the Bataclan and various other locations in Paris, they had very, very tenuous links to their religion, very little understanding of their religion. If anything, they were people who did not understand their religion very well and just got sucked into it, Ben.
John Allen, finally, very quickly before I let you go, given this court case in the United States, would you say that America is doing more to help probably Kenya in the war to crush, or the efforts to crush the Al-Shabaab?
Well, America has pledged its commitment not just to Kenya but to a number of other African countries in its war against terrorism. America has notionally been one of the main targets of terrorism ever since the 9/11, September 9/11 attacks, and even before that. And therefore, they have a personal and national interest in pursuing terrorists that may have links back to their country around the world. So, yes, they may be cooperating with Kenyan agencies and East African agencies, but it definitely is a national interest that is being pursued. For instance, if you think about it, the agency that's prosecuting, or rather presenting the evidence against Malik Jones, is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and that operates mainly, or notionally should operate mainly within the country. But the FBI, as well as other state security agencies from the United States, have expanded their mandates to do with terrorism specifically to any threat that is linked to the United States. The NYPD has one of the biggest budgets on terrorism in the United States, Ben.
Right. Thanks, many thanks, John Allen Namu, journalist and CEO of Africa Uncensored, with some insights on that court case, U.S. American Malik Jones, that if found guilty by that court, he faces a minimum mandatory sentence of 30 years. Elsewhere, the West African nation of Liberia is said to be declared Ebola-free, ending an epidemic that had also plagued the nations of Guinea and Sierra Leone. The announcement by the UN Health Agency came after two 21-day incubation cycles of the virus. This is after the last confirmed patient in Liberia tested negative twice for the deadly disease that has killed more than 11,300 people in 2 years. But as KTN Zinzi Kibiku now tells us, the countries remain at high risk of additional small outbreaks of Ebola.
Liberia is to be declared Ebola-free for the third time in a year, as West Africa appears to finally be over the epidemic that left over 11,000 people dead since it began in early 2014. The Ebola-free declaration comes after Liberia's last Ebola patient tested negative. The country had previously declared itself virus-free in May and September of 2015, but each time a fresh cluster of cases appeared. According to the Center of Disease and Control Prevention, even though Sierra Leone had the highest number of Ebola cases at 14,122 compared to Liberia's 10,666, the death toll was highest in Liberia at 4,806, with Guinea registering 2,536 deaths from 3,804 cases. In total, the outbreak affected 28,601 people, killing 11,300 of them. At its highest, Ebola sparked fear around the world, and governments and businesses took precaution. New cases have dwindled due to successful public health campaigns and the intervention of national and international health workers. There were cases in 7 other countries, including Nigeria, the United States, and Spain. Though almost all deaths were in the 3 West African states, governments from as far as Cuba, France, and the United States sent health workers and equipment to the 3 countries in an attempt to get a grip on the disease.
Greetings of appreciation. Appreciation for the role that Kenya has played in Liberia's own fight. First, the fight for peace, where General Pandi served with the UNMIL forces, and more recently, in our battle against the Ebola disease.
Governments and international health workers joined local health workers to combat the disease, and new cases dwindled due to public health campaigns, an effort to trace and isolate potential sufferers, and safe treatment and burial of patients and victims. The World Bank estimated the economic damage of the outbreak, which devastated the mining, agriculture, and tourism industries in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, at $3.2 billion over 2014 and 2015. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.
African lions are set to gain greater international protection this year in the wake of the killing of Cecil, the lion, by the American dentist in Zimbabwe in 2015. Tough new U.S. regulations on the importation of lion trophies will come into force on the 22nd of January.